Hello, I'm Jane Barton of Turnstone Genealogy, and I'm delighted to be part of this year's All About That Place event. I have two one-place studies, a rural parish in Cumbria and a municipal cemetery in Rutherglen near Glasgow. I'm also a volunteer tour guide and researcher with the Commonwealth War Graves Foundation, and the aim of my talk today is to encourage you to really think about how those who died in the First World War have been and continue to be commemorated in your place and over time. To begin, let's consider the concepts of material culture, the physical objects created by humans that make up our environment, and material memory, the recollection of the past using these objects. These concepts form part of the discourse of archaeology and anthropology, and of museum studies. Memorials are a key part of the material culture associated with commemoration. Rowlands and Tilley state that memorials exist as a way of fixing history. They provide stability and a degree of permanence through the collective remembering of an event, person or sacrifice around which rites can be organised. But rites of commemoration can result in decontextualisation of the event we are trying to remember, something which has been discussed in Holocaust studies, for example, and indeed in connection with some of the First World War centenary events of 2018. So with this little bit of theory in the back of our minds, let's have a look at some of the material culture associated with the commemoration of the Great War. There are war graves, war memorials and rolls of honour, publications and exhibitions, photographs and obituaries, cards and telegrams, letters and diaries, and much more. This great variety of objects may be collective or individual in nature, public or private, permanent or ephemeral, contemporary or retrospective. Let's look at some examples from my own one-place studies. First, the parish of Bolton's in Cumbria. In the corner of the churchyard there is a small war memorial listing the names of the 12 men of the parish who died in the war. Inside the church is a framed roll of honour listing all those who served, and there is a small local history publication containing details of each of the men who died from this and several neighbouring parishes. Rutherglen's war memorial is rather more imposing and bears the names of over 500 men. In the cemetery stands a cross of sacrifice, indicating the presence of war graves, 49 of which are from the Great War. A full list with plot numbers can be found on the Commonwealth War Graves Commission website. The War Memorial and Cross of Sacrifice are collective monuments, but to really appreciate the diversity of material culture associated with Rutherglen, we must look at individual memorials. Alan John Edmiston has a gravestone in the cemetery, but he is also commemorated on the War Memorial at Stonelaw High School, on a memorial plaque in Rutherglen Old Parish Church, on the magnificent memorial in the chapel of Glasgow University, where he was studying medicine, and a short biography appears on the Glasgow University Roll of Honour. These objects reflect the various communities Alan was part of in life, and those who wish to remember him in death. John Anderson's standard issue Commonwealth War Graves Commission headstone in the cemetery carries a personal inscription chosen by his wife Janet, and he is remembered with work colleagues on the Highland Light Infantry Tramways Battalion Memorial, now in the Glasgow Transport Museum. Lawton Roger is named on the Roll of the Fallen for the Royal Technical College, now part of the University of Strathclyde, and his obituary was published in the Proceedings of the Institute of Chemistry, of which he was a member. The local scouting newsletter also published a lengthy obituary. He was clearly well loved and respected as a scoutmaster. Many of those memorialised on gravestones in the cemetery are not actually buried there. The Commonwealth War Graves Commission database indicates that Hugh Stewart is buried in France. The material culture associated with the fallen of Rutherglen is indeed scattered across the globe. So far, we have considered the who, what and where of commemoration. But what about the when, why and how? War memorials had a particular significance in the context of non-repatriation of bodies. Ordinary working-class families from Rutherglen or rural Cumbria could not have imagined travelling overseas to visit a gravesite in France or Belgium, Egypt or Iraq. Indeed, many of the fallen have no known grave. Both the War Memorials Trust and the Imperial War Museum have information about war memorials as physical objects, when they were built, who funded them, and how decisions were taken about their design and which names to include on them. A snippet in the Daily Record in 1923 mentions a Rutherglen War Memorial Fund and hints at tensions between the subscribers and the committee. The full story can be found in meeting minutes in Rutherglen archives. The memorial was eventually unveiled on the 26th of October 1924. There is a wonderful film of the event in the National Library of Scotland's Moving Image Archive. It has remained a focus of commemoration ever since. For more information on war graves, the Commonwealth War Grave Commission's Grave Registration Database has information about the process of designing and installing each stone. Here we can see that as recently as 1993, 3 new standard issue headstones were installed in Rutherglen to replace private memorials which had fallen into ruin. Commonwealth War Grave Commission memorials are intended to stand in perpetuity, and the process of maintaining them is ongoing. As the years pass, the names on the memorials no longer conjure up memories of the people they represent. In recent decades, there has been a growing interest in researching the lives of those named and retelling their stories. Both the Commonwealth War Graves Commission and the Imperial War Museum have websites which collate these stories. The Commonwealth War Graves Foundation has an extensive programme of tours and talks, and there are hundreds, maybe thousands, of local history publications, exhibitions and websites. Please do share some of them in the comments after this talk. The centenary of the First World War saw a renewed interest in existing material culture and a huge surge in the creation of new objects associated with commemoration. In common with many parishes, Bolton's installed silhouetted soldiers next to their war memorial. With Rutherglen Ranger Guide units, I facilitated research for a cemetery walk to mark the centenary of the Battle of the Somme, what turned out to be the beginning of my one-place study. The Royal Society of Chemistry republished Lawton Rogers' obituary in a commemorative booklet still available online, and there was a spectacular collaborative installation of 100,000 ceramic poppies at Windsor Castle. At least one of those poppies was placed in memory of a man from Rutherglen. The majority of these objects are public in nature, but what of the private objects, kept safely tucked away in cupboards and attics in memory of loved ones lost in the war? As these individuals pass beyond living memory, the objects associated with them and the context of these objects might also be lost. Lest We Forget was a Heritage Lottery-funded project led by Oxford University, which aimed to digitally archive some of these objects. I was lucky enough to volunteer at the Glasgow Digital Collection Day, where we saw some wonderful objects and heard some remarkable stories. 2 of the men in this photograph are the Syme brothers, who worked as railway porters in Glasgow before the war. Both of them lost their lives. The family had kept this invitation to the memorial service for fallen railway workers held at St Paul's Cathedral, and the memorial booklet that was presented to them at that event. Similar small-scale show and tell events have been held in communities up and down the country, especially during the centenary. Hopefully this talk has demonstrated that the objects and activities associated with the commemoration of the Great War can add to our understanding of our place over time. If you'd like to explore further, here are a few links to get you started. There are also a couple of books on material culture if you're interested in the theory. and I'll be giving an in-depth talk on using Commonwealth War Graves Commission resources on the 9th of November. That's with the Society of Genealogists. If you have any comments or questions, please do get in touch, and thank you for listening.